Russian President Vladimir Putin has unequivocally stated, should his forces engage in a direct confrontation with NATO, the world will be plunged into a total nuclear war. A statement that might sound like an exaggeration, if not for the fact that the system behind it is already prepared for execution. Both Russia and NATO have spent decades designing protocols that do not necessitate extensive political debate for activation. Mere minutes or even seconds are sufficient. The nuclear triad of each power, comprised of intercontinental missiles, strategic bombers, and ballistic submarines, is engineered not solely for offensive strikes, but also for automatic retaliation. Because once a missile is launched, the chain reaction can no longer be stopped. We acknowledge that a nuclear war would be catastrophic, yet do we truly grasp the swiftness with which everything would come to pass? Which cities would be wiped off the map before the world even grasps what is happening? And most disturbingly, are you certain you'd survive long enough to witness the consequences? Prepare yourself. Today I'll reveal the minute-by-minute end of the world. And once you discover this, you'll never be able to unlearn it. Minute 0. The worst decision has already been made, and there's no turning back. Diplomatic efforts have failed, warnings proved to be useless, and now there is only one path remaining: total destruction. Russia and NATO just authorized nuclear weapons. Somewhere in Russian territory, a metallic silhouette remains dormant inside its armored coffin, but it won't be for much longer. A series of small explosive charges detonate in a millimeter-perfect sequence, lifting the container's lid as if it were a trap releasing a beast, and then the roar begins. The Tupolev missile awakens with a hellish thunderous roar. Its 47-ton body quivers as the solid fuel ferociously ignites, propelling it skyward like a beast tearing free from the earth at more than 8,000 kilometers per hour. Followed by the RS-28 Sarmat, known as Satan II, with a range of over 18,000 kilometers and up to 15 nuclear warheads. However, this is no longer just a simple test launch. It is in fact a surgical execution. Even before it leaves the Earth's atmosphere, its digital brain springs into action. It automatically connects to GLONASS, the Russian satellite system equivalent to GPS, and updates its flight path in real time. The mission is not to annihilate a city, as a traditional inertially guided missile might. That would be far too simple. Thousands of kilometers south of Japan, one of the primary targets would be a U.S. attack force stationed in the Pacific. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, and cutting-edge technology are all stationed on the island of Guam. Russia cannot match the United States in terms of ships, fleets, or bases, yet it possesses something capable of altering everything with a single strike. This is nuclear precision delivered from space. This is why the initial targets are neither capital cities nor the civilian population. The priority is to leave the enemy with no ability to respond, to destroy their silos, their nuclear submarines, and their bomber bases. Everything capable of retaliating or striking back needs to be eliminated. It's an attack designed to be fast, precise, and brutal. But NATO has the exact same plans. And in less time than it takes a news report to announce an imminent nuclear conflict, hundreds of additional missiles will have already launched in the opposite direction, and this is only the beginning. Minute 5. In the sky, something isn't quite right. The US's SBIRS defense satellites have just detected massive heat signatures, columns of fire rising from enemy bases, military exercises, a misinterpretation, or the beginning of the end. The United States has invested decades and billions of dollars to achieve this specific goal: real-time detection of a ballistic launch. From short-range missiles in Syria to stealth attacks in Ukraine, no engine ignition has ever gone unnoticed, and this time, the signal leaves no room for doubt. A large-scale missile is in flight and it's coming for something. The tension is unbearable. The data streams in, thermal signatures are confirmed, flight patterns match. This is not a false alarm. With a heart racing, an officer picks up the phone, uttering two words that will change history forever. Confirmed. Nuclear strike in progress. The military high command receives the news, and there is no longer any room for doubt. It is now the moment to decide whether to respond with fire. It is minute 10. The threat is now clear. There is no turning back. The president has been notified. His face, though calm, reveals the gravity of the moment. In less than 5 minutes, he makes his way to an underground bunker, specifically constructed to endure even the unimaginable, a direct impact from a nuclear weapon. As he descends through the reinforced concrete tunnels, chaos begins to reign on the surface. Sirens blare loudly in major cities. High-ranking political and military leaders disappear in seconds into classified shelters. Inside the underground command center, surrounded by his key advisors, the president establishes a connection on a secure line. In front of him, a digital map displays the trajectory of the enemy missiles, approaching with relentless speed. Without hesitation, he issues the command, "Activate the anti-missile shield." In the sky, hundreds of SM-6 interceptors rise to attempt the impossible, to stop the rain of fire that is on its way. The screens are filled with trajectories, impact estimates, and countdowns, but everyone in the room already knows the inevitable. Despite all the technology, precision, and thorough preparation, not every nuclear warhead can be stopped. Certain cities are on the brink of vanishing. Minute 15. The line has been crossed. The end is no longer debated, it is only to be managed. The nation stands condemned, and now the sole remaining decision is how to distribute the retaliatory strike. Strategic submarines, hidden for weeks under the Atlantic waters, spring into action. Cruise missiles are launched in low-altitude flight, flying so low that radar systems cannot even detect them. They are invisible ghosts soaring across the ocean with a clear destination: enemy cities. Meanwhile, on the surface, the population receives the final alert. There's no more time for orderly evacuations. The authorities can only ask people to move away from urban centers, to seek makeshift shelters, to prepare for the absolute worst. Yet, everyone already knows that the worst has long since begun. And just as panic begins to sweep through the streets, everything goes dark. An invisible wave travels across the sky. It is not yet an explosion, but the consequences are both immediate and brutal. The electrical grid collapses, satellites become blind, radars go silent, and planes lose communication. Cell phones, radios, and television simply cease to function. Everything has been silenced. There is no internet, no news, and no instructions. Only an absolute void remains. It's minute 20. The president no longer hesitates. Before him, the nuclear briefcase lies open. Every key has been verified, and every protocol has been activated. There's no turning back from this act. But at this point, it's no longer about avoiding destruction, but about ensuring the enemy pays the highest possible price. With a turn of a key and a code spoken in a trembling voice, the final order is given. The LGM-30G Minuteman, 3 intercontinental ballistic missiles deployed in 450 silos and traveling at Mach 23, are launched towards the opposite side of the planet. At the same time, warships and strategic submarines unleash their Trident 2D5 medium-range missiles. The total nuclear war between Russia and NATO has officially commenced. It is now minute 25. All theories are gone. There is only fire. The initial Russian missiles strike their targets. Due to geographical proximity, Eastern Europe and Western Russia become the first hellscape. Countries such as Poland, Finland, and quite obviously Ukraine are the very first to fall. Explosions erase military bases in seconds. Where there were anti-aircraft shields, now only smoking craters remain. On the other side, Russian cities near Europe begin to feel the weight of the retaliation. Murmansk, Kaliningrad, and other key facilities in St. Petersburg are hit with surgical precision, but one city remains standing: Moscow, the very heart of Russia. Its sophisticated anti-missile shield intercepted the initial projectiles, with distance playing in its favor. Missiles launched by the United Kingdom, France, and the United States are still in flight, but the silence doesn't mean salvation, it's just the calm before the apocalypse. It's the first electromagnetic pulses effect, from a nuclear detonation hundreds of kilometers high. Its purpose is not to kill, but to isolate, confuse, and prepare the ground. It's minute 30. The defenses have now failed. The deadliest projectiles, those designed to penetrate the most sophisticated anti-missile shields, begin their final descent over the entire European Union. From the Baltic to the Mediterranean Sea, the alarms are no longer ringing because many of them were silenced just minutes earlier by the initial electromagnetic pulses. The cities, barely aware of the horror that is coming, have no time to react. In the sky, some missiles are intercepted at extreme altitudes by systems like Aegis or SAMPT, but their effectiveness is minimal against such a wave. For every missile shot down, 5 more survive, and the worst is yet to come. Now that the atmosphere is ionized by the initial explosions, radar systems start to fail, signals get distorted, tracking capabilities diminish, and each side capitalizes on these veils of confusion to initiate their subsequent action: the strategic bombers. From hidden bases and airborne platforms, B-2 Spirits, 2 160Os, and nuclear-capable Rafales begin their approach. All have received the final code. The attack is confirmed. Beneath the surface, hundreds of ballistic missiles, having survived the initial volley, ascend from remote silos and submarines concealed within the Atlantic and Pacific. This constitutes the second wave. Now, the objective isn't merely bases or radars. Now they aim directly at the heart, the great cities, the industrial centers, the dams, the nuclear reactors, the oil refineries, and the telecommunication infrastructures, those places where life and civilization converge. Cities like Warsaw, Rome, Berlin, Madrid, Paris, and London become primary targets. Minute 40. Now it's the American continent that faces hell. Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles launched from silos in Siberia, submarines in the Arctic, and bombers from Eastern Europe begin to strike Canada and the United States. Major eastern cities like Washington, D.C., New York, Philadelphia, and Boston are wiped out in a matter of seconds. To the north, Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver suffer a similar fate. Despite the deployment of ground-based anti-missile shields like the Ground-Based Mid-Course Defense, GMD, and Aegis naval interceptors, they only managed to stop a fraction of the attack. The rest falls unopposed on critical infrastructure, military bases, electrical grids, financial systems, and densely populated areas. There is no time to evacuate, only to run, to hide. 2,000 nuclear warheads have detonated globally, with 2,000 more seconds from impact. At the 60-minute mark, the old continent has succumbed. NATO's European members are erased from the political, economic, and military map. Russia's first two nuclear waves met their objective with devastating precision. Architecture, history, life. Everything has been pulverized. NATO responded with everything it had left. Trident II missiles from British submarines. French warheads launched from strategic bombers. Everything was released before it could be destroyed. Minute 70. The war is no longer just news, it's history. International networks broadcast images of smoking cities and unrecognizable landscapes. The paralyzed international community watches in silence as two superpowers mercilessly annihilate each other. It's no longer about military strategy, but about ensuring the enemy can never rise again. The second wave of ballistic missiles, this time in larger numbers and with greater precision, impacts the most distant targets. The few remaining anti-missile defenses were already devastated by the prior explosions. This time, virtually all missiles reach their intended targets. At this juncture, the United States, Russia, and Canada lie reduced to irradiated rubble. It is now minute 120. Barely more than 2 hours have elapsed since the launch of the very first missile. The entire world is plunged into a hell no one ever thought they would see. The preliminary figures are so absurd they seem fake. At least 200 million dead, 100 million on each side. And that doesn't even include the victims of the impending nuclear winter. The skies are stained with ash, and the atmosphere is filled with radioactive particles that will begin to drift with the winds. It won't matter if you lived in Mexico, India, or Southern Africa. The radioactive cloud knows no borders. The consequences will be brutal. Accelerated cancers, birth defects, species extinction, ecosystem collapses, mass poisoning of water and soil. Agricultural systems will fail. Famine will become the next silent weapon. And the saddest part is that all of this could have been avoided. Day 30. 30 days after the nuclear apocalypse, the entire Earth breathes invisible ash. No region on the planet is free from radiation. The particles thrown into the air by thousands of explosions have been carried by the winds to the most remote corners. The poles, the deserts, the jungles, the mountains. Nothing is spared. In the northern hemisphere, where all the attacks occurred, the accumulation is fatal. But even in the southern hemisphere, in regions as distant as Chile, Argentina, South Africa, and Australia, levels exceed 2 sieverts, enough for many to start dying, despite being half a world away from the conflict. To understand the scope of this, remember that 4 sieverts kill half of those who do not receive medical attention in just 30 days. And that threshold has already been surpassed on most of the planet. The deaths continue to rise. By this point, more than 200 million people have lost their lives. Year 1. 12 months after the first impact, the planet is no longer recognizable. The skies remain covered by a dense layer of radioactive dust that blocks the sunlight. Photosynthesis has stopped, crops have failed, livestock have died, and reserves are depleted. The climate has collapsed. In equatorial zones, temperatures fell by 20 degrees Celsius. In the Arctic, it dropped by nearly 100 degrees. The seasons have vanished, the oceans are cooling, and snow is falling where it never has before. Direct deaths from radiation and explosions are now approaching 550 million. But famine, diseases, the lack of potable water, and the collapse of electrical and medical networks are pushing the figures by another 5.6 billion victims, 70% of the world population. In regions like the United States, Russia, Europe, and China, 99% of the population has vanished. There will be no one left to tell the story with words. But the satellites, the fossils, the burnt bones, and the rubble and debris will speak for us. They will speak of a species that had everything, but could not contain its arrogance. Because if humanity ever chooses to embark on this path again, let this at least serve as a dire warning. There can be no possible victory in a total nuclear war.